Giselle had always trusted her husband Ryan more than anyone. They had been together for 10 years, building a life she believed was stable and full of promise. But lately, something felt off. Ryan, who used to be so loving and present, had become distant. He started staying late at work, came home with excuses, and his usual warmth was replaced with cold indifference. Giselle told herself it was just stress from work, maybe a midlife crisis or a busy period. But as days went by, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His phone would ring constantly, but when she'd ask, he'd give her vague answers, even a little defensive. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened that would change everything. It all started with a simple knock at the door. Giselle had been folding laundry, absent-mindedly humming to herself, when the sound startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. As she opened the door, her heart skipped a beat when she saw the delivery person holding a large envelope addressed to her husband, Ryan. It wasn't the kind of thing they usually received, and the sender's name was unfamiliar. Curiosity mixed with a growing sense of unease. She accepted the envelope, gave the delivery man a polite smile, and closed the door. She turned the envelope over in her hands, hesitating for a moment. Something about it felt off. She couldn't explain why, but instinct told her to open it. Inside, she found legal papers, divorce papers, and next to it, a letter with Ryan's handwriting, addressed to her. The words on the page hit her like a punch to the stomach. The letter wasn't just a legal formality, it was filled with cruel, almost careless words. Ryan spoke about how he had found someone else, how their marriage had run its course, and how he was already preparing for a new chapter of his life. It wasn't even written with much emotion, just cold, detached statements that made it clear this wasn't a decision he'd made recently. No, this had been in the works for months. It was as if he had already moved on and was just now catching up to tell her. Giselle stood frozen, the paper crumpling slightly in her hands, a rush of betrayal and disbelief flooding her mind. She had suspected something was off, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined this. As she tried to make sense of what she had just read, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Ryan. "I know this is hard, but please understand. It's over. I'm happier now. Don't try to fight it." The words were blunt, and Giselle's eyes stung with tears. She didn't know what to do. Her first instinct was to call him, demand answers, scream at him for his coldness, but something held her back. She knew that calling him would only give him the power to explain things away, to manipulate the situation further. Instead, Giselle took a deep breath. She'd spent years building a life with him, but she knew now that she had to think clearly, not emotionally. After a long moment of stillness, she wiped her eyes and placed the envelope on the counter. She had a plan. She wasn't going to let this betrayal define her. There was something about the way Ryan had been acting lately, the hidden phone calls, the sudden secrecy, that now made sense. She remembered the nights he'd come home smelling like another woman's perfume, the way he'd hide his phone when she entered the room. The signs had been there all along, but she hadn't wanted to believe them. Now that the truth was staring her in the face, she knew she had to take control. Instead of reaching out to Ryan, she started gathering her thoughts. She called her lawyer, someone she had worked with before when she was first starting her business. Giselle had always been independent, and over the years, she had kept a close eye on her finances. She had made sure that her business, a small but successful boutique, was in her name alone. She had never trusted Ryan when it came to money, and now that decision seemed to be the smartest one she had ever made. Her lawyer assured her that they had a strong case, especially with the evidence she had already collected. Giselle's stomach twisted with the thought of confronting Ryan, but she knew this wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. This was about her future. Later that night, after her lawyer had instructed her on the next steps, Giselle went into the kitchen, trying to focus on the mundane tasks of making dinner, but her mind kept circling back to the betrayal. The knock at the door had changed everything. She wasn't just dealing with a broken marriage anymore. She was dealing with the reality of a man who had underestimated her. The man she had loved and trusted had made a choice, and now she had to make hers. The next day, Giselle spent hours at her boutique, trying to keep herself busy and distracted from the storm of emotions swirling in her head. Her shop was more than just a business. It was her pride, her achievement, something she had built from the ground up. She had worked long hours, sacrificed time with friends and family, and poured her heart into it. Now it felt like the only thing in her life she could still control. As she organized the shelves and arranged displays, her mind kept drifting back to Ryan's coldness and the thought of him with someone else. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the complete disregard for everything they had shared. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Ryan. "I've made arrangements for us to sell the house. I think it's time to move on. We'll sort it out." The words were so casual, as if their entire life together could be reduced to a mere transaction. Giselle didn't respond. Instead, she turned off her phone and focused on what mattered: her business, her future, her strength. This time, she would not be a victim. She would not beg for explanations or apologies. Ryan had made his choice, and now it was time for her to make hers. The knock at the door had marked the beginning of her new chapter. The next morning, Giselle woke up with a sense of clarity. As she lay in bed, the previous day's events replayed in her mind like an endless loop. The letter, the cold text from Ryan, the knock at the door, each piece falling into place, showing her that her life had taken a turn she never saw coming. But instead of feeling lost, she felt a surge of determination. She knew now that she couldn't just sit back and let the pieces of her life fall apart. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let someone like Ryan destroy it all. Giselle spent the day organizing her thoughts. She sat at the kitchen table, jotting down every detail she could remember, every conversation, every red flag, every moment that had seemed off. She wasn't just doing this for closure. She was doing it for the future, her future. Every piece of evidence she could gather would be vital, not only in the divorce, but in making sure she could continue with her business and personal life without any unnecessary setbacks. She called her lawyer again, making sure they were prepared for the next step. The divorce papers were one thing, but she wanted to ensure that Ryan wouldn't be able to take anything from her, especially the boutique. It was the one thing in her life that had been hers and hers alone. She hadn't been foolish. While Ryan spent his time out of the house, she focused on making her business a success. She had never mixed their finances, and that decision was paying off now. She smiled faintly, realizing how much foresight she had shown. The thought of how Ryan had belittled her hard work in the past only fueled her resolve. He had always mocked her business, called it a hobby, never fully understanding its significance to her. Now it was her weapon, her shield. Later that afternoon, as Giselle stood in the boutique, the reality of the situation set in. She had been married for almost a decade, and yet, in a single moment, everything had changed. She couldn't stop thinking about how easily Ryan had walked away from everything they had built. The coldness of his actions struck her, but it also solidified her sense of purpose. She wasn't going to let him win, not in this way. She would make sure that he understood the price of his betrayal. The phone buzzed again. Giselle glanced at the screen, already knowing it was Ryan. She hesitated for a second, but then without hesitation, she clicked open the message. It was another text, this one dripping with sarcasm and self-pity. "You can't keep the house forever, Giselle. I'm going to make sure we sort this out, and you can't hide behind your little shop forever. Just wait." Her eyes narrowed. He was playing games, trying to bait her into a reaction. She didn't fall for it. She didn't respond. There was no need. Instead, Giselle picked up her phone and made a call to her lawyer. This wasn't just about getting out of a marriage. This was about protecting what was hers. It was about showing Ryan that he had underestimated her in every possible way. She wasn't just a woman who had been scorned. She was a woman who had built something from nothing, something he would never understand. The next day, the legal papers arrived. This time, they were for her. She signed them with a steady hand, feeling a sense of finality wash over her. Ryan's betrayal had shaken her to the core, but it had also awakened something in her. The woman who had once been unsure, the woman who had put her heart into a marriage she thought would last, was now the woman who would take back control. The papers weren't just the beginning of her divorce. They were the first step in reclaiming her life. As Giselle sat at her desk, signing her name for the last time, a quiet thought lingered in her mind. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The following week, things started to settle into a strange new normal for Giselle. Each day felt like a step further from the life she had once known. The boutique, which had always been a sanctuary, now felt like a lifeline, a constant that she could hold on to amidst the storm of her personal life. The papers were filed, the lawyer was handling the details of the divorce, but there was still something lingering in the air. She couldn't stop thinking about Ryan's behavior, his sudden and unexpected departure, and the way he acted as if it was all just a transaction. It stung. But as the days passed, Giselle realized that the anger she had initially felt was slowly transforming into something else: determination. Each morning as Giselle unlocked the door to her boutique, she felt a little more in control. She poured herself into her work, focusing on the details of her business, the new merchandise, the marketing strategies, the customer experience. She was building more than just a brand. She was building her future. She wasn't doing this to spite Ryan. She was doing it for herself. And somewhere, deep down, she knew that her success would be the ultimate proof of her strength, the proof that she didn't need anyone to define her. But just when she thought she was moving forward, another unexpected event took place. It was early one morning, just as she was getting ready to open the shop, when the doorbell rang. Giselle opened the door to find her ex-mother-in-law Karen standing there. Giselle hadn't seen Karen in months, not since the tension between her and Ryan had become too much to ignore. Karen was holding a cup of coffee, looking unusually somber. I know this isn't the best time," Karen began, her voice soft and hesitant. "But I needed to talk to you." Giselle stood there for a moment, unsure of what to expect. Karen had always been kind, but Giselle had never felt truly accepted by her husband's family. She'd always been the outsider, the one who worked too hard, the one who didn't fit their idea of what a perfect wife should be. Still, she stepped aside and gestured for Karen to come in. "I know you've been through a lot," Karen said, once they were seated in the shop's back office. "And I'm not here to make excuses for Ryan, but I need you to understand something. He's not handling this well. He's making bad decisions, and it's affecting everyone around him." Giselle listened quietly, her emotions running high but staying in check. It was clear that Karen was trying to justify her son's actions, but Giselle didn't need an explanation. She needed the truth. He's been talking about his plans, his future with her. Karen's voice trailed off, and she sighed deeply. "But I know you. I know how strong you are. And I wanted you to know that you have more support than you think. You're not alone in this." For a moment, Giselle was taken aback. She had never expected this kind of conversation. But as Karen spoke, something within Giselle shifted. The support wasn't just a gesture of kindness. It was a reminder that she didn't have to carry the weight of this burden alone. It was a reminder that she had more strength than she realized. "Thank you," Giselle said, her voice steady. "I appreciate it, but I'm not relying on anyone. Not anymore." Karen seemed to understand. After a few more moments of silence, she stood up to leave. "If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out." As Giselle watched Karen leave, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The woman who had once been swept up in the expectations of her marriage, the woman who had tried to make everything work even when it seemed impossible, was now standing on her own. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she had been stronger than she had given herself credit for. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and quiet moments of reflection. Ryan's attempts to contact her were ignored. The text grew more desperate, more accusatory, but Giselle remained firm. She was done, and each time she resisted his attempts to manipulate her, she felt a little more empowered. She wasn't the same woman she had been when he left. She was someone who understood her worth and wasn't willing to settle for anything less. Her boutique continued to thrive, gaining more attention in the local community. Customers came in droves, some to support her, others simply curious about the woman behind the successful business. Giselle reveled in the newfound attention, but it wasn't the praise that kept her going. It was the satisfaction of knowing that, despite everything, she had turned her life around. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And then, just as things seemed to be settling into place, Giselle got another unexpected visit. This time, it wasn't from Ryan or anyone from his family. It was a former colleague of Ryan's, a woman Giselle had never met but had heard rumors about. The woman's name was Kelly, and she had an air of confidence about her that Giselle immediately recognized. She wasn't here to plead or apologize. She was here with something much more important. Kelly didn't waste time. "I know this is hard to hear," she said, sitting down across from Giselle in the boutique's small office. "But I think you deserve to know the truth about Ryan." Giselle's heart skipped a beat. The truth. She had been craving it for so long, yet she wasn't sure she was ready for whatever Kelly had to say. "He's been playing both of us," Kelly continued, her voice steady. "And I think you need to know what's been going on behind your back." Giselle felt her chest tighten. This wasn't over yet. The truth was coming, and it was going to hurt. But she was ready. She had to be. As Kelly spoke, Giselle listened intently. What she learned shocked her to her core. Ryan's actions weren't just about betrayal. It was something deeper, something Giselle had never imagined. But even as the details unraveled, Giselle found herself oddly calm. She wasn't in control of Ryan's actions, but she was in control of her own. And no matter what the truth was, it was only another piece of the puzzle that would lead to her freedom. Ryan had no idea what was coming, and neither did she. But Giselle was ready for whatever came next. She was stronger than she had ever been before. The revelation from Kelly left Giselle in a daze for days. The truth she had been waiting for came like a sharp, sudden blow. Ryan's betrayal was more than just an affair. It was a calculated plan to erase her, to strip her of everything she had worked so hard for. Kelly's words kept replaying in her mind. "He never saw you as an equal, Giselle. He thought he could manipulate everything, including your business." Giselle wasn't sure how to process it all. The shock of it weighed heavily on her shoulders, but underneath that weight was a strange sense of clarity. Everything started to make sense. The little things, his need to control the finances, his mocking of her hard work, the secretive behavior. It was all part of a bigger scheme. Ryan had never believed in her, not in the way she thought he did. He saw her success as something to be taken, not celebrated. But Giselle wasn't going to let him win. She had spent far too long second-guessing herself, trying to fit into a role that never suited her. Now, with the full truth laid bare, she realized that she had been right all along. She had protected herself. And more importantly, she had protected the future she had built. Her lawyer was firm when they discussed the next steps. "We've got everything we need, Giselle. He's been trying to manipulate you, trying to claim what's yours. But you're in a strong position now. This will not be his victory." Giselle nodded, feeling a calm resolve settle over her. It wasn't just about getting a divorce anymore. It was about making sure Ryan understood the consequences of underestimating her. As she prepared for the next round of the legal battle, Giselle found herself spending more time at the boutique, the one place where she felt in control. It had become a sanctuary, a symbol of her resilience. There was a quiet pride that came with watching the shop thrive, with seeing women walk in and leave with not just purchases, but smiles. They supported her not just because of her products, but because they admired her strength. Giselle had become a symbol of what it meant to rise above life's betrayals. And then came another surprise. One day, while she was at the shop, she received a message from Mark, a former client turned friend, who had heard about her situation. He wanted to meet up. "I heard what Ryan's been doing," he texted, "and I want to help." Giselle was taken aback. She hadn't expected help from anyone outside her close circle, but Mark's offer was genuine. They met at a nearby cafe the following day. "Listen, I know this might sound strange," Mark began after they ordered coffee, "but I've been in a similar situation. My ex-wife tried to take everything I had after we split, and I wish I had someone to guide me through it." Giselle nodded, appreciating the honesty in his voice. "I've learned a lot over the years, and I can help you with a few things. Strategies, advice on how to protect yourself better. Ryan's not just after your money. He wants your confidence shattered." Giselle felt a warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't expected this kind of support, and though it wasn't the kind of thing she typically sought out, it was exactly what she needed. Mark didn't just offer practical advice, he offered reassurance. He reminded her that what she was doing wasn't just about survival, it was about standing tall, showing everyone that she was capable of holding her ground. After that meeting, Giselle felt a shift in herself. She wasn't just defending her assets anymore. She was fighting for her dignity. Every small victory, every strategy she employed, was a reminder that she wasn't just reacting to Ryan's decisions. She was shaping her future. Ryan's attempts to contact her grew more desperate. Texts became more frequent, and the tone shifted from accusing to pleading. "You're being unreasonable, Giselle. I never meant to hurt you. This is just the way things have to be." His words were as empty as the promise he had made years ago, and Giselle's resolve only hardened with each message. She ignored them all. Then, one afternoon, as she was preparing for a big meeting with her lawyer, another unexpected twist came. Ryan showed up at the boutique. Giselle had heard the bell ring, but she didn't look up immediately, assuming it was just another customer. It wasn't until she heard his voice, tentative, almost apologetic, that she turned. "Giselle," Ryan said, standing awkwardly near the door. I thought we could talk. I realize now I've made a lot of mistakes." The words felt like a punch to her gut. He wasn't here for reconciliation. He was here because his life was falling apart. She could see it in his eyes. The confidence he once had was gone, replaced by something far more desperate. But Giselle wasn't the same woman who had once cried over his absence. She was stronger now, and she wasn't going to let him manipulate her again. "I don't think there's anything left to say, Ryan," she replied, her voice steady but firm. "You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. You're not welcome here." He tried to protest, but Giselle raised her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "I have nothing more to give you. The only thing left between us is paperwork. We'll let the lawyers handle it." Ryan's face fell. For a moment, Giselle almost felt pity for him, but that pity quickly disappeared. The man standing before her was not the person she had married. He was someone who had shown her nothing but contempt, and now he had to live with the consequences of his actions. As Ryan left the boutique, Giselle felt a weight lift from her chest. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even sad. She was at peace. The end of her marriage had been inevitable, but it didn't have to define her. She had always known her worth, but now she was ready to show the world just how much strength she had gained. Her future was bright, and she was going to make sure it was hers to shape on her own terms. With a deep breath, Giselle turned back to her boutique, the place where she had found her strength. She didn't need Ryan. She didn't need anyone. She had everything she needed within herself, and that, she realized, was enough. As the days turned into weeks, Giselle's life began to take on a rhythm of its own. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, but she had already come to terms with the fact that the marriage was over long before the papers were signed. Each day, her focus remained on what mattered most: her business, her future, and her peace of mind. The boutique was thriving. What had once been a small venture was now becoming a staple in the community. Giselle's dedication to her work had paid off in more ways than one. New customers came in every day, some curious about the woman behind the success, others simply looking for the beautiful merchandise that she had carefully curated. The positive energy of the boutique was contagious, and Giselle couldn't help but smile every time a customer left with a purchase, their faces bright with satisfaction. The shop had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of resilience. It represented her strength, her ability to rise above the turmoil that had once threatened to drown her. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, the phone rang one evening, bringing with it another unexpected twist. Giselle had just finished closing the boutique and was getting ready to head home when she saw the name on the caller ID. It was from her lawyer. "Giselle?" Her lawyer's voice was calm, but there was an edge of urgency. "I have an update on the case. Ryan's legal team is trying to make a move. He's trying to claim the business as marital property. They're arguing that since you started it while you were married, he should have a stake in it." Giselle's heart skipped a beat. This was the one thing she had been protecting from the beginning, the one thing that had kept her grounded through all the chaos. Her boutique wasn't just a business. It was hers. And now Ryan was trying to take it from her, just like he had tried to take everything else. "Do they have any basis for this claim?" Giselle asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though inside the anger was beginning to rise. Her lawyer sighed. "Not really. You've kept everything separate, finances, assets, everything. But they're going to drag this out as much as they can. It's just another way for him to make things difficult for you." Giselle clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wasn't going to let him win. He had already taken so much from her, but this, the boutique, was the one thing that had always been hers. He couldn't have it. She wouldn't let him. "Let's fight this," Giselle said firmly. "We've got the evidence we need. I've been careful with everything. Let him waste his time. I'm not backing down." The next few days were filled with tense meetings with her lawyer as they prepared to face Ryan's claims head on. But despite the stress, Giselle felt a strange sense of calm. She had done everything right. Her business was her lifeline, and she had protected it with everything she had. Now it was time for her to stand up and fight for it. But just when Giselle thought things couldn't get any more complicated, an unexpected visitor showed up at the boutique. It was Melissa, Ryan's former girlfriend, the woman he had left her for. Giselle had heard bits and pieces about Melissa, but they had never met. Melissa had apparently heard about the legal battle, and after a few weeks of reflection, wanted to talk. "Giselle," Melissa said, her voice softer than Giselle had expected. "I know this must be strange, but I really need to talk to you. I owe you an apology." Giselle raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and skepticism flooding her. "Apology?" she asked, crossing her arms over her chest. "For what?" "For everything," Melissa replied, taking a step forward. "I know what happened between us wasn't fair to you. I thought I was in love with Ryan, but everything's changed. He's not who I thought he was, and I've realized I've made a huge mistake. I just want you to know that I never meant to hurt you." Giselle took a deep breath. She hadn't expected this. Melissa had been a part of Ryan's betrayal, and here she was standing in front of her, offering an apology. It was almost too much to process, but as she looked at the younger woman, she saw someone who was also caught in a situation that was far from ideal. "I appreciate your apology," Giselle said slowly, "but you need to understand something. You didn't just hurt me, you helped him destroy everything. And now he's trying to take what's mine. I don't need your sympathy or your apology. I need you to understand that what happened was a choice, his choice. And now I have to deal with the consequences." Melissa nodded, her face red with shame. "I get it. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I've seen how Ryan has treated you, and it's not right. I never knew the full extent of it until everything fell apart." Giselle sighed, trying to keep her emotions in check. "Look, I'm not angry anymore. What happened is in the past, but I'm not going to let him or anyone take what's mine. Not now, not ever. The conversation ended soon after, and Melissa left the boutique with her apology hanging in the air. Giselle wasn't sure what to make of it. Part of her still felt resentment toward her, but another part understood that Melissa had been swept up in something she hadn't fully understood. Regardless, it didn't change the fact that Ryan's actions had pushed Giselle into a position where she had to fight for everything she had built. As Giselle locked the boutique doors that night, she felt a strange sense of closure. Melissa's apology hadn't healed anything, but it had reminded Giselle that she wasn't alone in this anymore. She had fought for her business, for her independence, and now she was ready to fight for her peace. Whatever Ryan or his lawyers threw at her next, she was ready. They would not take her life from her. Not now, not ever. Giselle knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she had come too far to turn back. She had built a life for herself, and no one could take that away. The next chapter was waiting for her, and she would meet it with everything she had. Months passed, and Giselle found herself living a life she hadn't expected, one that was far better than the one she had left behind. The legal battles were finally behind her, and the final divorce settlement had been signed. Ryan had fought hard, trying every trick in the book to claim what wasn't his, but Giselle had stood firm. Her boutique, her home, and all her assets remained protected, just as she had meticulously planned from the very beginning. Ryan had walked away with nothing but his pride shattered, his promises broken, and his attempts to control her rejected at every turn. In the end, the finality of the divorce wasn't something Giselle mourned. It was something she celebrated. Ryan had made his choices, and now so had she. She didn't need him. She never had. Giselle's boutique continued to grow, expanding into a second location, and she had started to see the fruits of her hard work reflected in the success of the business. The quiet strength she had cultivated throughout the entire ordeal had turned into something tangible, something real. She had built this from the ground up, piece by piece, and it was thriving. The boutique wasn't just a shop. It had become a symbol of resilience for other women who had faced their own struggles and battles. Word of Giselle's story spread, and more customers came, not just for the merchandise, but for the woman behind it. She had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that no matter what life threw at you, you could rise above it. One afternoon, as Giselle was preparing for a meeting with her marketing team, she received a message from her lawyer. It was an update on Ryan's latest attempts to contest the settlement. He was still fighting, still grasping at straws, trying to overturn everything despite the judge's final ruling. Giselle couldn't help but roll her eyes. It was almost comical at this point. Ryan, still trying to claim what wasn't his, still trying to rewrite the narrative of their past. With a sigh, Giselle sent a quick response to her lawyer. "Tell him it's over. I've moved on, and so should he." She knew this would be the last time she'd hear from Ryan on the matter. He had underestimated her from the start, and now it was over for good. She had built her future without him, and no amount of legal wrangling could change that. Later that week, Giselle was invited to speak at a local women's business conference. Her story had become an inspiration to others, stories of resilience, independence, and the power of knowing your worth. She was hesitant at first, not because she didn't believe in her story, but because she had never expected to be seen as a role model. But when she arrived at the conference, she was greeted by a crowd of women eager to hear her speak. As she stood before them, sharing her journey from betrayal to success, she felt a sense of pride that she had never known before. "I'm here to tell you that you can build something for yourself," she said, her voice steady but full of passion. "You can protect yourself. You can rise above the people who try to tear you down, and you can be stronger for it. Don't let anyone, especially someone you thought you could trust, take away your power. Your future is yours to create." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time in a long while, Giselle felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had found her purpose. It wasn't just about the boutique anymore. It was about showing other women that they could do the same, that they didn't have to settle, that they could achieve their dreams, no matter what life threw at them. As Giselle walked off the stage, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. She didn't see the woman who had been betrayed and broken. She saw a woman who had risen from the ashes, stronger and more powerful than ever. She had learned that sometimes the best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about succeeding on your own terms. The next few years brought even more success. Her boutique chain expanded to multiple locations, and she began to mentor young entrepreneurs who were just starting out. She became a respected figure in her community and beyond. Her story was no longer just about divorce or betrayal. It was about triumph. It was about overcoming, about turning pain into power. And then, one afternoon, as she walked through the latest store opening, Giselle received a message. It was from her ex-mother-in-law, Karen. The message was simple, but it hit Giselle hard. "I'm proud of you, Giselle. You were always the stronger one. I wish I had seen that sooner." Giselle smiled softly, reading the message again. It wasn't an apology, but it didn't need to be. It was a recognition of her strength, something she had never fully expected from that side of the family. In that moment, Giselle realized that she didn't need anyone else's approval to feel proud of who she had become. She had created this life for herself, and no one, least of all Ryan, could take that away. Her phone buzzed with another update from her lawyer, but Giselle wasn't bothered by it anymore. Ryan's name wasn't the one that defined her future anymore. Her name, Giselle, was. And that, she realized, was more than enough. As she stood there in her boutique, watching her team prepare for the next big event, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had built this life, and she was proud of every single step it took to get here. She had taken everything Ryan had tried to take from her, and in the end, she had turned it into something far greater than he could ever imagine. And as the doors of her boutique opened for another day of business, Giselle smiled. This was her life now, and it was exactly where she was meant to be.